so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads. Welcome to a very special episode dedicated to none other than you, the pea heads themselves. I am your pea head enthusiast and hostess for the day, Alexa Hauser. I have been blessed to have the experience of helping out with Positive Head social media for the better part of a year. And through my digital interactions, I began to realize, as did Brandon, that we have some incredible beings listening to this show who are taking the information that Brandon puts out through the podcast and using it to transform their lives and create wonderful things. You listeners are all a huge, huge part of the life force that propels this show forward through time and space, and we think it's time to bring forth some of you beautiful reflections and delve a little deeper into this collection of energy that is the Positive Head community. So as we shine the spotlight on our listeners, what we'll have them do is share their stories of how they attracted Positive Head into their life, the transformation it's facilitated for them, and what they're focused on creating now that they're in a more positive headspace. Also, this episode of the Positive Head podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Hello, all you positive heads. On this week's Pea Head Posse episode, our guest is Colleen Coles. Colleen is a purpose alignment coach who helps women feeling stuck in their relationships, purpose, and intuitive power access their authenticity and connect to the divine to better serve others in their purposeful career and in meaningful relationships. She specializes in helping women unlock the root of codependent behavior, needing others to be happy before you can be happy, or the inability to leave an unhealthy relationship, as well as having clarity in what's stopping them from knowing their true purpose. Through her energetic healing techniques, she helps uproot the blocks that keep you stuck from living out your bigger potential and heal trauma that has been locked in your body for years. Colleen has been doing this work for 4 years and is a certified life coach through the Divine Living Academy and is a level 2 graduate from Gabrielle Bernstein's Spirit Junkie Masterclass. Hi, Colleen. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks so much, Alexa. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited that we can make this happen. I've been watching all your videos on Facebook and love this subject, love this topic. Think it's so important right now of relationships and especially coming to it from, an intuitive place. And actually, you were specifically picked out by Brandon Beecham himself to be on this podcast. So welcome again. Very excited to have you.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, so as we do with every guest, let's, hear a bit about your story, what your life has been like that has led you to be on this path and be talking to us here now.
Sure. So I started coaching and doing more spiritual work about 4 years ago after being an elementary teacher and just realizing I couldn't reach people or kids in the way I wanted to, just teaching fractions or being in a school setting. And so at that time is when I kind of made more of a commitment after being really unhappy and doing what I felt everybody else wanted me to do or what was smart and, apply for more teaching jobs, even though you don't feel good. And just in this mentality of working really hard and the glory of that. And at one point I was really I don't get depressed that often, but as depressed as I could get, I was there. And just working 13-hour days at the school and working with preschoolers that I didn't really enjoy, but not seeing a big payout and thinking that the more I'd put into this, the more I'd get out. But in reality, I just wasn't motivated to do this teaching anymore, even though I studied for it and people told me I was great at it and all these things. So I, of course, without realizing it, internalized that and had a lot of shame of what's wrong with me and why aren't I doing what I know I need to do to be like an A+ student or an all-star player. And it came down to this one point where I was walking out of a kindergarten classroom where I had just substituted, just so drained. And I like shut the lights off, was about to close the door, and I see this little magnet on this teacher's cabinet, and it said, "Do more of what makes you happy." And it was all colorful, and this teacher too was just phenomenal at what she did, and really, from what I could tell, really joyful and happy in what she was doing. And I remember just thinking, like, she's so lucky. Like, immediately victim mentality for me. Like, why can't I do that? Like, isn't she lucky? How entitled is she to get to do what she wants? And then I realized I was like choosing to be there. And I was like, I don't have to do this. And it wasn't overnight, but at that moment, and then I made a commitment that was just like, I'm going to see what happens if I just do whatever the F I want. And I just want to do, and I want to see what I can do. So I became a server at night. I was taking all these like fun spiritual classes, energy classes, Mind Valley Academy classes, left and right, just exploring everything that felt fun and felt good. And that inevitably led me to find coaching and purpose. And so that's what I'm doing now. And just where even that's led within the course of the last 4 years for me is that it isn't just even around like purpose and you will be feeling great, because that's really one part of our life. And even like my title is a purpose alignment coach, but it's starting to broaden out, because what I have found is that as career driven as we might be or ambitious as we might be, there's other facets of our life that are also very meaningful and very purposeful. Like for some people being moms or just having a great relationship. And what I have found is that when we feel really stuck in what we're doing in some meaningful way in helping other people, or we don't know what that thing is, or we feel we can't really be ourselves, that 100% is coming out in our relationships too. Because how we do one thing is how we do everything. I never understood that concept until I really dove into what I do now. And the same blocks that come out in relationships are what come out to stop us from living our purpose. And so the more that we let those blocks go, the more we're able to find and discover our own authenticity, which, by the way, is already inside. And like, that's the coolest thing that I have like paradigm shifted from working with my first coach ever. And she was like an Eckhart Tolle in the flesh in my town in a female version. But she was just like, we are already, it was amazing to like apprentice with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she just taught, like there's nothing that is missing from you. And I know a lot of spiritual, like there's like soul retrieval stuff like that. But all of this to say, I believe that we are all whole and complete. And if anything, there are layers of crap on top that we've learned, and conditioning and all of those things that are almost like hiding our brilliance. But the good news is that you don't need to get anything else to get your brilliance out. Like, sure, if anything, we need to help each other, like uncover that and like just rid the layers of stuff on top. For example, for me, it was like, I should be going to grad school. That was one big layer of belief that I didn't need. And it was just to make other people happy. But it was actually stifling my own power and my clarity and my authenticity. And so to me, that's the good news. It's just about having the awareness to see where these blocks are, how they're manifesting in usually every aspect of our life. And when we get those cleared out, that's when you already have it in you. And then that's when you can go share it with the world and be your most beautiful self in ways that you felt like, oh, if I do this, it's wrong. But that's the exact thing people are looking for. It's when we actually do what we really want to do. that like everything starts to light up, and that's when you find what you're looking for. And it's just such a beautiful process. So yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I have like chills everywhere because I kind of mentioned this to you before, but exactly what you just described, like to a T, is exactly what I experienced. Like I had this huge realization this past week, exactly what you said. One, to reiterate what you said was how you show up for anything, it's going to show up in your relationship. So whatever blocks you have to other things you're doing, it's going to show up in your relationships. And something I realized was for me, I've had this, my whole life, one of my biggest blocks has been a fear of really being seen, like really being seen. It's being seen authentically, like being vulnerable and showing and opening my heart and letting somebody see. And that has been kind of, my issue in, even though I do these podcasts and stuff, in a certain way, it's been an issue in my work and in that aspect of my life. And then I noticed a week ago, it really dawned on me. I was like, whoa, this is a blockage that shows up in my relationship too. Like this is the blockage. It's the same thing. It's just in my relationship. And then as the second part of my realization, which you also said, was, wait a minute, what if it's not about like working so hard to fix this block and become something I'm not? What if it's about just relaxing and realizing that when I relax, the blockage will, remove, or my vibration will raise. I can surpass that blockage essentially because I'm coming back to me, which is all powerful and everything. So what if it's just like you said, it's not that we have to work so hard to become something we're not. We have to find a way to let go of the things that are not us and just come back to who we are. Right. And literally in the past week, my life has shifted like 180 degrees. I'm not even kidding you, just from having those two realizations. So I love what you're talking about. I've lived it. She's speaking the truth. It's so true. That's beautiful. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, actually, so Colleen, real quick, and I'm going to ask the editor to edit this out, but is there like I just want your audio to be as clear as possible. Is there like a little something scratching across the microphone, like maybe an earring or a piece of clothing or something like that?
It could be my hair.
Yeah. Is it possible to just like pull the hair back? Yeah, perfect. Hold on. I'm going to make a note so Danny edits this out. 10:30 mark. Edit out. Sound. Okay,
Thanks
cool.
for letting me know.
Yeah, no, it was very subtle, but I want it to be as clear as possible. Cool. Okay. Awesome. So, well, that's amazing. So what are you working on now that you found your purpose as being a coach and working with relationships and all of that? So what are you working on and creating now? How are you working with people?
Yeah. So right now I'm working with people one-on-one. I have a program called The Alignment, and it focuses on these 4 pillars that we're talking about that I've kind of distilled down, which is intuition, which is helping you, like you said, like let go of the stuff and allow yourself to come out. And that is connected, and that is guidance right there. Authenticity, relationships, and purpose. So it's a program that helps get rid of the blocks in the way of those things and really start to live it. So that's how I'm working right now. And then later down the road, I want to create kind of like a group program off of intuition for purpose, and how to know kind of the difference between fear that's holding me back in a good way, in like a way that's protecting me and is actually my intuitive power speaking up, or is this conditioning, and how is that holding me back? So that's kind of in the back burner, but honestly, like that's how I'm working with people, is more one-on-one, because I think that's the most powerful way at this time to do that. But as I do that, I just also am wanting to share, like now that I have my grounding, even in my business, and knowing what I stand for and knowing how these things interact and connect and have in my life, that's what I want to share more of with other people. So even just reaching out to other podcasts to be able to share this, because sometimes people can't work with me one-on-one, or like my program group isn't ready and I don't want to hold people back. So I'm really service oriented. That's like a main value. So I'm just excited to get more into media, honestly, and like share it.
Yeah, and you should be, because like you're so natural in your videos. Like you feel so authentic and just so genuinely excited about the content that like it makes me excited. I watched like 3 of your videos off the bat once we connected. So so everybody go. Where can people find you, by the way?
Sure. So people can find me on Facebook at Colleen Coles. Colleen, and then Coles. And on Instagram, Colleen Coles, and on my website, colleencoles.com. So
perfect. Consistency is great. Yeah. Well, can we dive into a little bit more about like relationships and, what you were describing in the beginning? Is there something that you think, for example, like what's something that you think, maybe what's like the number one stumbling block in having authentic relationships, maybe?
Yes, great question. So the number one stumbling block in having authentic relationships, I would say, is this thing called codependency. And I feel like people that I talk to, they're like, I think I know what that is. And for a long time, I thought I did too. But knowing the root of it and knowing how it shows up is really profound and key. So codependency is this concept that really became a subject of study in the 80s and in the 90s, when more and more alcoholics were getting help. And they noticed a trend in a personality trait with the significant others of drug abusers or alcoholics. And those people were called, or their trait was called codependency. So the roots of it is kind of in a stark kind of a place, like it's everybody's alcoholic. But basically that concept is that a person who has codependency feels like they don't have boundaries with who they are as a person, because their livelihood and their love comes from somebody else. So what happens is there's a lot of ways to kind of boil that down. Meaning, it feels like I can't be happy until you're happy. I'm responsible for your happiness and your emotional reactions. And so if you blow up at me, I caused that. So what can I do to make sure that doesn't happen again? And again, instead of interdependence or independence, there's codependence. So I almost think of it as like 2 little like amoebas, like little cells without barriers, and they just kind of morph into each other. So it's really, oh God. And I love like the people I talk to, because a lot of the people I talk to are empathetic and that like, psychic, like very intuitive, and whether they're very developed on that scale or just figuring out they feel something different, there is so much correlation between people who have codependent behavior and traits and who are also very, very empathic, because the boundary thing is where it gets very confusing. And when we're children, a lot of the times people who are very psychic or very spiritually inclined or very intuitive became that because they had usually something happening in childhood where they had to intuit to survive. They had to understand their dad's anger when he wasn't happy, or their single mother's, shame, so that they could feel safe and protected by her. And so at the same time, this trait around codependency, also, by the way, like from this background and the roots of it being around alcoholics, it's that the codependent is addicted to the person who's an alcoholic. So the alcoholic is addicted to the drug, but the person who is codependent, they're addicted to the person's love.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So that even comes back, Alexa, to like what we shared about at the beginning. Like, I'm already whole and complete. I have everything I need. It's about subtracting. It's about letting go. But we don't feel that way, and we haven't been taught that. And it feels like something's broken or we need to get filled up. And so when we've had trauma or wounds in our childhood specifically, where we didn't feel filled up, we didn't feel loved, we felt responsible for other people if they got mad at us. That's what has that boundary just disappear, because we want to feel filled up by that person's love. And it becomes this addictive quality, I guess, where we feel we can't be alone and we feel like we can't live without somebody's love. And quoting here concepts from the Course in Miracles, it becomes a very special relationship where the ego kind of convinces us that this person, this job, this opportunity is the one. This is what'll heal it all. This is what'll change everything.
Wow.
And when it comes to relationships, that's when, of course, it's hard to leave that person. Right? Of course, it's hard to even say what you really want to say, even in simple things like, no, I don't want to have sex tonight. I'm really tired. Like, really, no, I don't want to watch The Voice tonight, and please don't take it personally. But when we like, that just happened with me and my husband. I was like, I don't know, but I was like, I gotta say it. And it was fine. It was fine. But it doesn't feel fine until we realize these roots, because when we were children, that was our survival. It was that I can't make my dad, who maybe he's not alcoholic, but maybe he just gets angry. Maybe it was even just one incident, like a client I had who for so long, she just felt she couldn't speak up. And when we would do my energetic clearing and we'd touch into all the different chakras, like we have the energy and the light is what I call it, kind of come down, and I scan what is going on in each chakra. And for her, there was always just this physical, like, thickness in her throat. And it manifested through her wanting to start a business, but just not feeling she could really reach out to people. And when we started working together, she would have a really hard time articulating what she needed or what she was feeling, just being herself. And when we finally knew each other enough and in this work got deep enough where I was like, all right, ready to clear this? She's like, yeah. What came through was that there was a moment, and we talked to the energy, which is really cool about this. There's not really guessing. She just talks to the block. But what the block kind of said and what it showed was that when she was 3, she was coloring on her living room floor, and she was having a great time expressing herself, being creative, when all of a sudden her dad, by the way, who she said, I don't get how childhood could relate because I had the best childhood ever. And I was like, I believe you, but something had to have happened. So she had the best childhood ever. And she was sitting there as a 3-year-old in the living room, coloring in her little coloring book, when all of a sudden her dad came in and stepped on one of the crayons and broke it. And for whatever reason, he flipped and he got really, really angry. And she said, even just telling that story makes my throat close up. And I said, what did you have that mean to you? And she said that if I express and if I get out there, I'm going to make other people uncomfortable.
Wow. Yeah.
Energetic belief affirmed, like that is locked in there. And once just seeing, like, it doesn't have to be super trauma. Like, you know, it can be really small like that. And it can be substantial chronic conditions, you know, like my dad tended to be angry, and he's not a bad person, and he didn't know how to deal with it other than how he did. But as an empathic person, an intuitive person, I definitely picked up on that. And I love my dad and I wanted to help. So I would take this energy on, but there's where the codependency comes. It's really hard to tell which is my anger and which is his, or right? And so we do that then, again, how we do one thing is how we do everything. For my client, it was showing up where she couldn't talk to anybody. But guess what? She is now. It's exciting. Like she started to cut out bad relationships in her life and say, you know, I like, this isn't working for me, and being okay with that. And like, For one, I'll just share this too. Like, one of our sessions, she was having a really hard time letting go of the father of her child. And as much as she wanted to be independent, she knew she wasn't even attracted to him anymore. He was kind of going off the deep end a little bit in his behavior. And I said, well, what's the one thing that's holding you back? And she was just like, honestly, about like child support. So again, all of this relates to everything.
Yeah.
It's not just the relationship. It's that she was holding on to this thread and this cord because she didn't feel she could do it on her own.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so when we feel like somebody else is filling us up, somebody else is giving us the love, we're going to do everything to make them happy. And that's a sure tail sign of a codependent behavior, is when I can't be happy until you're happy. People pleasing, feeling like you're walking on eggshells. But when we came down to it, I was like, honestly, like, if he left, would you be able to buy groceries? She's like, yeah, of course I would. And just like having that snap out of reality kind of a moment, she was able to cut the cord and say, no, dude, you got to call your daughter. I'm not responsible. I'm not having this conversation with her. But she's able to like speak up so much. And just yesterday we met and she's like, yeah, it's fine if we don't meet in 2 weeks. My business is going great. Like, oh, I'm so excited. So it's really transformative when we look at this, and not only in our jobs and how we're speaking up there, but again, like that's how we're being authentic, is when we allow ourselves to do and be and say what we want. And so all of that to say, I think that's where it's a big block in relationships too, because that's why we stay in relationships when we don't want to, is because we think they're fulfilling our needs, but usually it's just a special relationship. They're just mirroring back to you something you loved, and it was just coming from you. The empowerment's coming from.
I loved when you said that. I mean, everything you said resonated so deeply with me, because I had, when I was very young, my mother, she was in the hospital quite a bit because she had like a couple different types of cancers, just kind of one after the other type of thing in my very early childhood. She's fine now. But, and for so long, I like neglected to see how that affected me at all. But, in my recent, especially after kind of becoming awake to my own spirituality and just, doing a lot of personal development, I keep getting this intuition that, me and my dad had a very codependent relationship. Because at the time, like my dad was the only one around, and so, and I it's funny because I was so young, but I keep getting this intuition when I feel back into that time that like he was very sad and I wanted him not to be sad. So it was like me constantly trying to figure out how to either, be there with him in the sadness or like lift him out or, be his happiness. And it's funny because, just recently in my life, I feel like I've shifted so much of this, but a big pattern, especially in the past few years that's been coming up, is this kind of like every time I start to get going, every time I start to move forward in my career, suddenly I'll like throw a bomb on it and even in my relationships, I'll throw a bomb on it and just like kind of like so that I don't get any further. It's like I'll either walk away or it's kind of like I sabotage it before it actually I start moving forward. And as you're talking, it's like I was kind of making that connection of like, oh wow, like, in childhood, like I almost felt like it wasn't right for me to excel. Like it wasn't right for me to be happy in certain ways. It wasn't right for me to like move forward without this person who is so sad. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
no, it absolutely does.
Yeah. And then the other thing that was sticking out to me was when you're talking about the special person. Oh my Lord, I have done that so many times. And I have felt like I have made in my past, I have made the special person. And it's been this very close, intimate relationship, but then also extremely volatile and ultimately blows up. And, that made a lot of sense to me. Thank you for describing that, because you just like answered a lifelong question for me in my head.
Yeah, and it's really funny because like in spiritual communities and stuff, I don't know why, I just haven't been introduced to it formally, but I see a lot of things about like twin flames. Like, did you find your twin flame? Yeah. And I dig it. I haven't been a part of that world or really know what's going on there. But like, I had a client just recently, she's like, do you believe in that? I'm like, I don't know. But what I do know is that it can be really tricky when we are thinking it's us, but it's our mind thinking like this is the answer. And that's a lot of pressure on any human being. Spiritual or not, that's a lot of pressure. And they will let us down. And just that pressure, they will energetically feel it and probably back out. So absolutely. I have found, in relationships, the thing that we can do the best for our relationships and to attract in great relationships is to feel 100% ourselves and filled up and confident. And that's so attractive. So, because people want that.
Yeah, totally. And so for someone who is if someone's listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, like I am in a codependent relationship, or it sounds like I am. What are some steps or a step they could take, something they could do to remedy that or to move out of that pattern?
So, okay. So to bring it back, I guess, to your example, if we may.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So what you shared, Alexa, I just want to let you know, like, and I've experienced this in the people that I help, like that is like the clearest thing you could have said is how, so what I would share for people who feel they're in a codependent relationship is, with help or by yourself, go back towards your childhood and think, what was the relationship that felt I couldn't leave that? And it usually will be pretty clear. And for you, just to, if we can use what you shared as an example, you were probably really close to your mom and felt very close. And if she is in cancer, in the hospital with cancer, it's almost like she left. It's almost like she might not make this. And so as a child in wanting to survive, like, having the love of our parents, and if they leave us, isn't just love. It's also our total shelter, our survival. It's not anymore. But when we're children, if they leave us, that means we die. So it becomes really important. So if your mom were in and out of cancer, like, it feels probably as a small child, she left you. And so if she left you, that makes your relationship with your dad so much stronger and necessary, because it's like, well, I better hold on here. And you're probably empathic. And so if you were feeling that sadness, that's usually why we always have energetic blocks, is because as little kids, we forget that we're in little bodies. And we're these huge souls that can do anything. We're infinite, but we forget we're in these little tiny bodies. And so what we do is we take on the energy of other people to help them.
Right.
So when I help people release their blocks, it's not, and anybody can, like, there's lots of different ways to do this. Even how you shared about letting it go and feeling it, that's called, one way to call that is somatic experiencing. And it's very helpful. Just letting yourself feel allows that energy to move. This is a different modality, but every time I work with somebody and we release that block, it's because the energy was adopted from some other person. Always. This energy was adopted from somebody else. And that makes it actually quite freeing, because it's not who you are. It's like, oh, this was my dad's sadness. I can start to let this go for myself and my dad. Oh, I feel more myself now. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So back to your question about, like, oh no, I'm in a codependent relationship. One, I would say get clear on where that's coming from, like the root. And even if you can't totally figure it out or feel like, I don't know if I totally released the block, like, one, you can always come talk to me or watch my videos and I have more. And you're still getting so much clarity from the awareness of seeing the connections. So this is where it gets really good. So when we understand those connections, you can be in a relationship and realize, oh, wait, this is not about Anthony here. This is about my dad. Like, this is about
Yeah.
relationship. Like, it can take a lot of pressure off from this special human being because it's really not that human being. And when we can realize, like, you have the power, like, you have the power within to do what you need to do. So, okay. So that's number one. Get to the block, get to the root. To see what's really going on. Number two, this is going to sound really interesting. Okay. But like the thing that helped me the most was, okay, codependency is when you don't have boundaries because you feel responsible for the other person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, for your example, I feel responsible for taking care of my dad because I feel his sadness. Again, people who are intuitive, and I am that. So I'm going to stop myself before I get too happy because it's not safe.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because he's my survival, as the child within says.
By the way, I still feel that way to this day. Like, I'm realizing now, like, that pattern is with him specifically still very present. So it's interesting. It's just becoming aware of that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Totally. And I honor that because it's deep. Yeah. So it depends on like how deep and how almost traumatic it can feel. Even if it's simple, it can still be traumatic in our body.
Right.
But there's small things we can take. So what I would say is like an action step is to actually take small, if necessary, actions to show yourself you're okay and to actually create a boundary. Okay, so one activity I really like to do is ask myself and write down. This is something I do with my clients. Where is everybody else happy, but I'm not? Where is everybody else happy in this scenario, but I'm not? And that will show you where you're afraid to stand up for yourself and have a boundary, where you're being codependent because you're willing to be, so to speak, walked on, and then what action you need to take. And it will feel very uncomfortable. It'll feel like dying because, again, this stuff is rooted in childhood where you felt like if they walked away from you, you would die. But what we're doing through taking the action is showing yourself, I'm not 3 anymore. This isn't reality now. I had the power and I have the power within. I used to think like every client I signed like was my lifeline, and every client that was my rent, and they were responsible for paying my things. And it felt like life or death if somebody is like, I don't want to work with you right now. Like, I would do everything to try to convince them. But what I started to realize was like, it doesn't matter on the person who comes to me. Every time they said no, I was still okay. And it wasn't their responsibility to pay my rent. Like, they had a great choice to say yes or no. And it wasn't even, if people on here have a business or want to start a business or want to start something purposeful and meaningful as a project, like, it doesn't matter what you do to make it happen, because the power isn't in that action. It's in you choosing, it's in you, like, keeping going. And in relationships too, like, the love you feel from this person is just a reflection of the love within yourself. So the more that we can allow ourselves to know ourselves and allow ourselves to feel that, aka self-love here, and treat ourselves with respect to say, no, you can't just do this because you want to, and I think you need to be happy doing this. Like, the more that we treat ourselves with respect, with boundaries, and through self-love, that will create awesome relationships anyway. So let me give you an example. So say I write out, where is everybody else happy and I'm not? In fact, I did this last year. And I remember at that time, I lived in a tiny little 500-foot like cabin off of a lake with my husband. And because there was only 4 rooms in the house, the first front room was my office. And he would come home. He's a massage therapist, a sports therapist. He would come home sometimes at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And just like, as I was working or really in the zone, or sometimes with clients, he would just like walk into the office. And I was like, okay, logically, he has every right to do that. This is his house too. But when I went onto the paper. I said, I feel so sad and I feel so mad when Michael comes and walks into my office when I'm still working. Mm-hmm. And at first I was like, that's not okay. That's not okay to feel that. And in reality, like, I was like, oh, right, because he's happy doing this, but I'm unhappy because I get distracted. And I realized, okay, so why am I not telling him? Because I'm not telling him because I don't want him to feel bad. Well, what would happen if he feel bad? He might get mad at me. What would happen if he get mad at me, Colleen? Well, he might leave. Like,
yeah.
Like, our fear typically innately is of abandonment, and it all stems from all this stuff. That's why codependency can feel hard to, like, that's why we feel like we're in the same relationship over and over and over again, or like the same problems come up. It's not because we're necessarily afraid to be ourselves. Like, that's not very scary. What's scary is like the fear of abandonment if we are ourselves, right? So, and that comes from everything we're talking about. So here's like little actions you can take. Is then for me, the action was, okay, I need to set up a boundary. Like, it's okay. We're not the same person. I don't have to, freak out. I can just talk to him, but also with the posture of like, this is the new thing. Like, this isn't going to happen anymore. And I did, and I talked to him, but that was the action that was like balancing out this place where this inaction where I was like, oh, it's okay, but really, really not doing well inside. So I did tell him, and then everything started to go better in our relationship because I wasn't pissed secretly. Yeah. Just one example. And through doing that, Alexa, I felt so much more powerful. Because I was like, oh, like, it's okay to say what I need. Oh, and it's magical. Like, there's even bigger things when we get into bigger, like the fears, and you take a bigger action, even if it's simple, but if it's big to you, it's going to feel like you're dying. You're like, your palms are sweaty. And that's when you're like, I don't know if this is right. I don't know, maybe, but you do it anyway. Boom. It's like, you can do anything because you broke through that place that held you back, and you realize all those people are not who your empowerment relies on. It relies on you. And they need you anyway for you to be yourself and go help the people you want to freaking help.
Yes. You got me about to stand up and put my hand up and say, yes, for sure. I love your energy. It's so contagious. And absolutely, like, it's crazy what divine timing, because like literally this is everything I've been experiencing firsthand in my life as well, in my relationships. And yeah, it is powerful. Like you're saying, even just something like that is so powerful. You're like, oh, I can be myself, and that actually makes things better. What?
Oh, right. Yeah. I know. You thought it was going to make everything not okay, and then secretly, what's so funny is like, that's where I think spirit, God, higher intelligence is actually trying to speak to us. It's actually trying to speak to us through the thing we think is wrong, and not in a, I don't know, not like going around killing people, but like in a way that's beyond thought. Like, it's beyond the concept. And a lot of the times in my life, it's where it's the exact thing I think I shouldn't do because either other people aren't doing it around me or it's not okay. Like, that's the exact thing that if I actually follow suit, like, that is what I'm being called to do. And that's where, when we do follow through, we break beyond all the chatter. We break beyond all those doubts and the feelings of self-doubt and all of that. Again, for me, it's mind chatter. Like, it just everything becomes so much calmer and freeing and enlightened because it's like waking up and seeing your life in Technicolor. Like, I didn't need any of that. Like, wait, this is actually, and then things just can really fall into place.
Totally. It's like, before you do it, before you actually start like speaking your truth and speaking authentically and asking for what you need, it's kind of like you're still buying into this idea that I think we've been sold that you need to keep things to yourself and that don't cause any trouble. And that, and this idea that people actually want to live an inauthentic life like it's better for you. If I feel like not so subtly that, or actually very subtly or not so subtly, that's what we've been being told or taught through media and TV and school and all kinds of things like that. Like just kind of shut up and deal with your problems on your own and just fall in line, basically. And in actuality, what you're doing when you're speaking and when you're communicating what you want is you're giving to the other person too, because and you're committing now to living an authentic life and and being transparent. And I think it's a gift to the other person too, because, you know, what's been becoming apparent to me is that the other person who's in any kind of relationship with you does not want to be a mind reader or try to guess what's going on with you. Like they do not want to do that. So even though you might be telling yourself like, oh, it's better, I don't want to cause any trouble, it's like that other person is actually, like you said, feeling it energetically or picking up that something's off. But then they internalize that. And then they're like, what did I do? What's wrong with her? Or what's, you know, and it causes these, internalizations and then projections, right? Like onto the other that are completely or somewhat false because no one's being authentic and speaking. And when someone has the courage to just say what's going on, it like dissolves that veil and wall and it allows the other person to meet them there.
Totally. Right. So one of the classic books on this is called Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. And she tells a really funny story that I immediately related to. And she said, so everybody, like, we'll just use this as like a general metaphor and story here. So she has scheduled lunch with a friend. And it's next week. Okay, great. So it becomes that day and she's just like not into it. She doesn't want to go. She's like, oh God, like I gotta go to this lunch. And she doesn't even like maybe with that friend, like really want to hang out. But to your point, you know, but I said I would, and it'd be polite to, you know, I have to do it, obviously. And really though, she's feeling like, I just don't want to do this. That's her authentic truth. Like her authentic truth is as shitty as this feels or seems right now, I don't want to go. Yeah. But she goes anyway because she wants to be polite. She wants to like do all the inauthentic things to like survive in society. So she goes and like they go like to this apple picking. So they're like picking apples and she's starting to notice this other lady like is just not into it either. Like she's like, I'm fine and just subpar. And finally, like, so it just wasn't very fun for anybody. And finally, she asks her, like, what's going on? And the other lady says, you know, honestly, I just didn't want to come today, but I didn't know what to say. And so I still came.
Wow. I love that story.
I know. And so then they break open in laughter because she's like, are you serious? I didn't want to come today, but I didn't want to hurt your feelings. I didn't want to hurt you because that would be my fault. Like if you felt bad, that would be my fault. There you have it. That's codependent. And it's a hard little line because, you know, obviously we don't want to be jerks. And if we do something in full alignment that's authentic, we can't be in control of somebody else's response. Yeah. You know, if we don't use words that are hurtful, but we still stand up for what we need, like, I don't want to watch The Voice tonight and it's not personal. I just want to chill. Like, you know, that's not hurtful. And when we can look at it kind of again, objectively to say like, are these words hurtful? No, but they freaked out. That's not mine.
Yeah.
You know, but to your point, like that's where it gets so interesting is where when we actually speak up and say that, typically, oh my God, this has happened so many times in my life where they're like, wow, you're really intuitive because I wasn't feeling it either. But really, it wasn't. It was just, I didn't want to do it. So I finally said so. And if both of them had, it's like they could have freed up an afternoon. But once they got real with each other, you know, that's when the authenticity and connection came through.
Yeah. I love that. I love all that story and those examples. And it's just so true. And I'm just thinking of all the ways that I do this, you know, in certain aspects of my life and the way that I'm learning, you know, I personally, I can feel I'm transitioning out of this gradually and feeling more and more like my own power. And it's like, I can feel, I was describing this to someone yesterday. It's like, I'm really starting to feel this power within me. And then every once in a while it gets a little tap in the shoulder that's like, hey, don't you want to look back there and see who needs your help though? Like, don't you want to look back and like go back and get that person? Yeah. Like, go take care of them and then you can bring them back up here. And it's almost like this voice that's trying to get me to regress, you know? And it's like before I would have listened and now I can feel it's like, no, because the best thing I can do for anyone is be authentic about what I want and what I'm moving towards. And it's like a magnet or like a light, you know what I mean? It's like, instead of constantly worrying, that's how we just constantly get stuck where we don't want to be. It's like, you know, just constantly trying to go back and help the others instead of kind of being the good kind of selfish, right? As Brandon always says, and really focusing on what we want and what we need. And when we can be in our power, that's when in our authentic truth, that's when we have the most power and the most of energy coming through us and the most availability for the people that we care about, right?
Totally. Absolutely. And that's the challenge or the work on the path of the empath.
Right.
To be able to see that voice. In my lexicon, I would say, yeah, cool. So that's the paradigm. That's the fear that's dying away and knows it. So it's trying to get your attention. And if you do go back, that's fine. It's all lessons. And you've just strengthened that paradigm. But when you, like you said, no, I'm not, because the best thing I can do to help others is to help myself and do what I want to do, what I need to do. And you said it becomes a magnet, it becomes a light. I could almost feel and see the power when you were saying that, as if it's like kind of coursing the Titanic. So it takes some momentum, but it's like, then the astronaut can like blast off. Like, yeah. So, and when you do that and you don't listen, you've just strengthened your own authentic power to say, oh, look, I don't need that. And then that's your breakthrough. And that's totally right. And you can help others more.
I love that. Oh, thank you for that reflection and confirmation. I love the way you phrased it. And, time has flown. I just looked at how long we've been talking. I'm like, wow, we could talk forever. So let me just skip to our last question here as we wrap things up, Colleen, which is, do you have any fun or inspiring manifestation stories or stories of synchronicity that you feel called to share?
Sure. So, I've actually shared a couple here and there already, but so last year I went to Brazil. So I went to Brazil and I went to see a healer who my own mentor, Gabby, has seen. And I was just like really lit up for 3 years to go see this person. And like, I finally got the impulse that like, this was the year to do it. And so I finally, made the things happen to do it. And at the time, I was kind of playing with this new tool that I call your purpose statement. So it's kind of like a vision board written out. And as I was kind of typing that up, I was planning on going in June. And so it was around like March and April, like this time, that I was like, let me try this purpose statement out. By the way, now I do it with everybody, all my clients and myself. It's very powerful. So I remember as I was drafting that, I just kept seeing this vision of like me surfing. And I was just like, Hawaii maybe, but like that has to wait. But I just kept seeing like these cool, like mountains in the background and like looking into the sun. And basically like, I was just like, well, whatever, I'm just going to go with that flow. Miracle after miracle happened where I was dead broke, and then boom, something happens where then I call a friend of mine who knows a pilot. He gets me a super cheap discount on the ticket. Boom, just step by step. What do I need right now? And it was like, oh, update the visa. I can afford that. Can't afford, where I'm staying, but I can afford that. Just one thing after the next coming to me, helping me, me deciding this was really going to happen, to the point where on this whole feeling of letting go and realizing others aren't your source, whether it's in a romantic relationship or in your purpose. Like the day before I left for this trip, I still had to pay for the 2 weeks of tour guiding and the place I was going to stay, which was a hefty sum. And it was the last thing because I didn't need to pay it until the day I got there. And this last day before I leave, this client kept not like showing up and she got scared. And I finally just like tithed her back her deposit. Now, and that was a main chunk too of what I thought I was going to use. And I was just freaking, but I was like, you know, like some money isn't worth making. And this energetically does not feel aligned. So I gave it back. I said bye to my husband that day. I was so scared, but through just acting as if, and then being myself and thinking, what would I want to do? Like, I would not be led this far just to go back. Like it has to happen. It has to come in. And so I finally just asked myself, like at a moment of quiet, just like, what would I want to do for people? And I was like, you know, I would just love to give people like free sessions, like free healing sessions. So I just made like a 4-minute video. I popped it in one of my favorite groups who I met somebody that then led me to Positive Head. Like, and I was like, yeah, here it is. And one person reached out. Cool. Did a healing. Cool. I made $100. So it's like, oh my God, she wants more. This is amazing. And when I go back online, I see 15 people had reached out.
Whoa.
So I was like, okay. And so I just stuck them in like 30-minute increments. I had 8 calls that day. 4 became clients, and I made $10 more than the exact amount I needed to get to Brazil.
I love that. That is awesome.
Yeah. And I know we're out of time, so there's multiple chapters to the story. I ended up going back to Brazil after coming home because I was so lit up by Brazil. It didn't make any sense. This was where, for me, I learned intuition and God can speak way beyond your comfort zone and way beyond the voice in your head. It's almost through what you desire in a quiet moment and what you think you shouldn't want. And taking the action on that not only can help yourself, but everyone around you. And I ended up on my wedding anniversary, just telling my husband, like, I want to go back to Brazil and just to explore Brazil. Like, basically, I want to be solo for a second. And it was ironic. It was that day because he wasn't feeling himself, and energetically, everything was just low. But he was like, I want you to feel free. And he's like, you know, we'll do what it takes. And so I went, and it felt like a big deal because I hadn't really traveled alone for just fun like that before.
Yeah.
So I did do that. But by the time I got back, he stepped up. He was more confident. He got a new job. He cleaned out our house. He learned Tantra, like all this stuff. I thought, oh my God, I'm hurting him. But finally, I felt allowed, and I spoke out. I felt guided to too. But we talked about all the things that were not right. Like, we talked about all the things that we were thinking in the back of our heads, kind of like those 2 ladies at the apple orchard. And through that, I had space, he had space, and we were able to grow separately, but together. When we came back, everything was stronger. So that to me has been a super life lesson of showing me, like, when you are authentic, you will help other people. Dude, oh my God. And just to wrap this up, like that purpose statement I wrote and that freaking surfing thing.
Yeah.
The last 2 days I was in Brazil the first time, I got a chance to go to Rio because one of our friends was there for a business trip out of all times. He's like, I already paid for this Airbnb. Want to come? I'm like, yeah. So we're there, and I'm like, wow, these are beautiful beaches. Wait, I could go surfing here. And I was like, oh my God, it's big. And I went, and I was there. And if you've ever been to Rio, there's this beach called Leblon, and there's these 2 huge mountains that are green. And at one point I was there, and I was on the water at sunset, and I was in my vision, and it was phenomenal. And this is the coolest part. I was there, Alexa, and I know we got to go. I was there. And I seriously was having the time of my life when all of a sudden I see somebody by me, and he's like waving his arms. I didn't even realize it, but he was drowning. We were too far out. Yeah. And it was like this African guy who didn't know how to swim. All of a sudden, buoys come out of nowhere. The lifeguards are there. I help him onto my surfboard. We all go back in.
Oh my gosh.
But the lifeguard told me, he said, if we didn't see you out there, we may have missed him.
Wow. That is really awesome. That is the whole story. I love it. I love all the energy. It felt so magical and so synchronistic and just validating and affirming everything we just talked about. Literally everything.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like when we're authentic, when we're allowed to do what we want, when we actually have fun doing what we want, that's when we literally are in the right place at the right time to help people, help others grow. Don't hold ourselves back, because then we're just holding others back. Like, have the confidence to get the stuff out of the way that would hold you back from being yourself. And that is codependency. But like all of it, that's what can help you live on purpose and have really meaningful relationships.
Thank you so much, Colleen. This was amazing, an amazing episode. I hope everyone goes and checks you out, ColleenColes.com, right? And Colleen Coles on social media. Yeah, definitely go check you. You're always posting videos and just awesome content on there. And thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me. So I do want to share right now, especially for, it's just a new thing I just did. I have a really cool recording that was on a coaching program as I was a guest kind of speaker, and it's what you need to overcome codependency. So check that out. It'll be on ColleenColes.com. Everything you need to overcome codependency. So check that out.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Everyone go check that out. Colleen, this was amazing. And hopefully our paths cross again soon.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye.
That's it for this week's episode. If you're a listener with a story to share and are interested in being featured on a future episode of this special series, you can email me at alexa@positivehead.com. Also, if you're craving more consciousness elevating content, be sure to check out Gaia, which is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web, where you can stream an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. As you all hear Brandon constantly say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to journey deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place we know of to do it. Period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Otherwise, tune in next Friday for another P-Head Posse episode. And until then, as Brandon always says, journey well.